with the ADDA support group tonight. And tonight we're excited to have both the Texas Workforce Solutions as well as the Texas Workforce Commission tonight. So this ADHD support group, we're a support group out of Fort Bend, out of the mothership that was founded in 1987 in the greater Houston area. For tonight, you may not have a child that has ADHD. You might have one that has ADHD. Either way, we're glad you're here and you're in for a real treat tonight because we are going to be kind of talking all things about employment and options and services and things that are available for our kids that want to go to work. As far as the ADHD support group, we meet the last Tuesday of every month. We have been meeting by Zoom. We have different speakers each month that kind of talk to the group. It could be parenting topics, medicine topics. It's always a wide variety of topics. But each month you can tune in the last Tuesday of each month. Tonight's meeting is being recorded. You will get an email with the recording and any flyers that these ladies have shared. And if you're interested in joining the Fort Bend support group, there'll be information in the email about that as well. So tonight, we have Anna Kluth with us from the Texas Workforce Solutions, and we also have Kristen Davis from the Texas Workforce Commission. So we're excited to have them both here, and so we don't want to delay. I'm just going to turn everything over to you, Anna.
All right, thank you, Allison, for having us here tonight. Specifically today, I'll be talking about pre-employment transition services. But first, I'll just introduce myself and kind of say our relationship with Kristen and vocational rehabilitation. So I work with Workforce Solutions, and I promote services provided by Texas Workforce Solutions, who Kristen works for. We serve 13 counties, there's 76 plus school districts. So we're out and about just trying to make sure parents, students, counselors, everybody knows that these services are available. These are free services. So we just want to make sure as many people have access to them as possible. So we can get started. So pre-employment transition services, there are 5 categories. There's job exploration, there's counseling on post-secondary education, job readiness, self-advocacy, and work-based learning. So job exploration, excuse me. Like I said, we serve students. These are students between the ages of 14 and 22. So while a lot of our employers that we partner with, they can't have, for legality reasons, anybody under the age of 16. So a lot of these job exploration and our vocational assessment training classes are great for that younger age group. This is just letting the students or the young adult explore what's out there, looking at labor market information about what's going to be available, what are good options once you graduate, or if there's something that somebody might like and maybe they decide that path might take 10 years to get a doctorate degree, maybe there's something else in that field that the person might like as well. And those are also done, those are pretty easily accessible. You'd have to ask your counselor about it, but the Berkman test is done online, so that's pretty accessible too, for sure. Next is job readiness. So these are the vocational adjustment training classes. This goes through everything from, waking up on time, how do I go to work, talking about money, what does it mean to make money, all of the soft skills, communicating with your coworkers, what's appropriate to say with your coworkers, what's not appropriate, how should you dress, maybe even if it takes you a long time to get up in the morning, helping that person come up with a schedule, or eating breakfast at 6:30 if you have to be at work by 8. Just all of the little things that help working be a success and be long-term.
Now, Anna, are these services, I know some services are for individuals with disabilities. Are these services for kids between the ages of 14 and 22, or do they also have to have a disability as well?
These, they also have to have a disability as well. But it's not, and I know sometimes people think VR and they have to be, they might think of certain disabilities. For these pre-employment transition services, all you need is a documented disability. So that could be, it could be somebody with diabetes or post-traumatic stress disorder. It could be cognitive or physical, but it just has to be documented. That's all the requirements are. And self-advocacy, that's kind of how, just what it sounds like. So it's learning how to speak up if you need an accommodation. How should you plan for your future? So kind of really thinking about what the individual wants out of life, or that sounds pretty, that's a big word, life, but just saying, what are the steps after college, or what do I want to do when I'm 20, and how can I get there? How can I be independent? So just learning how to speak up for yourself. Work-based learning. This is when we are actually engaging with employers out in the community. There's a couple of different options. We have paid work experience. This is all year round. And this is up to 12 weeks, 20 hours a week, 20 or 30 hours a week. I think that's where I need Kristen's help. I just forgot.
20,
sorry. Up to 20 hours a week. And so this is when an individual is at a job site, or there are remote options, because that's the world we're living in today. And then we also have summer earn and learn. So that's the one that's coming up for the summer. We want everybody to know about this. This is a 5 to 8 week internship, working up to 20 hours a week, and really kind of trying to find an employer of what his interest, what the individual has interest in, excuse me. And we pay the wages for that too. It's $10 an hour. That's where we partner with VR. So that's where you'll hear Workforce Solutions a lot, is for that. The paid work experience, like I said, is all year round, and it's a little bit longer.
And you guys are partnering with these employers for these jobs, right? It's not that the individual is going out and finding the job. Sometimes, what if they already have a job? Can they still, can you talk about that?
That might be something that Kristen can speak of, because if somebody already has a job and they're needing support, that would be a different route, but it is possibly available. Yeah, Kristen can speak to this. But as far as SEAL goes and the paid work experience, that's on our end. We're making those relationships, and the employer is knowing we're contacting that employer, we're letting them know when somebody's coming in, and yeah, they might have a resume, but they don't go through the whole interview process, and the burden is not on the individual to find the work site.
Awesome.
All right, and then counseling on post-secondary education. So this is just learning about maybe different certificate programs that are out there, different colleges, maybe just, it might look different for everyone, but just the counselors can help them figure out the different directions, whether it be finances, maybe location of a school. I do want to say that the financial aid options, they can help go over what those might look like, but through Pre-ETS, financial aid is not available. That would be applying for further services under VR. Okay, so who has access? So like we said, they have to be between the ages of 14 and 22. They need a documentation of disability. And the third component is they need to be in an educational setting. So that could be high school, it could be college, it could be middle school, that 8th grade if you have a 14-year-old. But as long as they're in any type of school setting, that also includes homeschooling as well. And like I said previously, these services are a little bit easier to get than the full VR services. This is just a one-page application, as long as you meet those other 3 requirements. And your financial information is not needed for Pre-ETS.
So I know that Kristen's going to talk more about the vocational rehab. And I know that there tends to be some confusion between the Texas Workforce Solutions and the Texas Workforce Commission, and when do I need which, and do I need both? So so you have one application, and VR has a separate set that Kristen's going to talk about, but why might they need both? And can you talk about some of those differences?
Sure. And so this application is going automatically to VR. So we're helping to promote these services, that this goes through to VR. So once the counselor they're going to see this one-page application, but they're also already going to be thinking about full-scale VR options for that person as well. And Kristen can definitely correct me if I'm wrong, because I think ultimately there might be more supports that they need, like maybe they need help with transportation or paying for clothing or things of that. That's where you'd have to apply for full VR services. But this application does go to VR. I'm just kind of like a mouthpiece for it, and I can help to get it there.
Are there any financial limitations? So if people, we often hear people say, well, we make too much money, we don't qualify for anything. Is there any kind of financial limitations to your services?
Not for pre-ed. So if it's not anything that's under these 5 categories that we went under, all the vocational training, the summer earn and learn paid work experience, none of those you need to disclose any financial records or income. And we just like to say, so we have all of the regular IDEA is included under pre-ETS. And then on the next slide are kind of examples of what people might not think of who could get covered under pre-employment transition services. So anything where you might need a little extra time in school, or you're needing a little, an accommodation of some sort, that's where pre-ETS might be a good solution for that. And this is just online resources. We keep this on here throughout the virtual world we're living in regards to job training, some of them. So there's college, there's kind of all of the categories are here. And so they're just kind of quick resources parents and kids can look at.
And will you send us a PDF of this particular page? Because when we send out the recording, we will we'll like to send this out on a PDF, and then that way they have all these links that they can look at when it's convenient for them.
Yes, absolutely. This is the regional office for VR, so the 832, and then there's a state number. Either one, they'll help direct you to the correct office and counselor. There's actually another Anna. So I'm Anna Kluth. I have a counterpart named Anna Holderberg. We do the same thing basically. And this is just our email addresses. If you want to reach both of us, we have that top one. Otherwise, either one of us can help you. We'd be happy to.
So if they're interested in engaging in Texas Workforce Solutions, they can reach out to either one of you directly, and then you guys assign them, or kind of, they get a counselor from there. Basically, there's an intake or something.
Yeah, so we're kind of help move the process. So yeah, they'll contact us. We might already know, or we'll email Kristen and she'll help us. But we're there to just do that connecting piece. Yes.
Perfect.
And now it is on to you, Kristen.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, I'd say. I'm Kristen, and I am the Vocational Rehabilitation Services Regional Transition Program Specialist. Really long name. All that means is that I am over all transition services for students with disabilities in the Gulf Coast region. I have 5 other counterparts, and we have about 30 transition counselors who work the entire Gulf Coast area, which is why we have Anna Kluth and Anna Holderberg helping us out with letting you know what it is that we do. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about VR services, since we really already got to touch on the pre-ETS side of it. So why do we have VR services? They're here to help people with disabilities get jobs. And with our students specifically, we're here to help train our students and get them ready to start looking for jobs. So there's a big emphasis on that training portion when it comes to our students that have disabilities. So one important thing to remember is that VR services are eligibility based and tailored to the individual. What that means is that whereas in school, many times we're working from entitlement based, when you get out of school and you're working with VR, even if you're working with VR in school, it's eligibility based. That means it's not guaranteed. We have to make sure that you're eligible for services. So again, I want to differentiate with pre-ETS services. If you're a student with disabilities, you can receive it. If you decide to go further with VR, then we have to take you through the process and make sure you're eligible, which is another reason to go ahead and start with those pre-ETS services so you can get whatever is available before you go into full VR. These are not emergency services, so they don't necessarily take a short time. It shouldn't take a long time, but it's not necessarily next day service. They are not time limited, but are also not long term. So we had some people that may come through and need longer term support, maybe shelter workshop or support employment, or something like what used to be with DADS, those types of longer term programs. We do not provide that long term of a program, but with our students, we usually see them from anywhere to 1 to 4 or 5 years, because we stay with them while they are in transition. And then if you need services after transition, you can still go into adult services as well. So it's not for lifetime, but it is a service that can go on as long as needed. These services are arranged and provided by the VR counselor with consideration to individual choice. So we help guide the choice-making process, but we respect the choice-making of the individual. But in order for those services to work, the counselor and the customer must agree on what direction they're going. So what does it take to be eligible for VR? The customer must have a physical or mental impairment. A lot of what the types of disabilities that we see, you saw in Anna's presentation earlier, and it includes those, but it's not limited to those. So it can be anything from a student being in a wheelchair to someone having ADHD, or someone that is on the autism spectrum, someone that has anxiety or depression. Any of those qualify as an impairment. The second criteria, though, says that the impairment has to cause a substantial impediment to employment. So it doesn't do to just have the disability, which is going to get you in the door with those pre-ETS services, but for full VR services, you must have that disability be in the way of you getting a job. So with our students, a lot of times we see that they need that help because the disability is something they're not used to in a work environment, and they need our help training. They need our help preparing for work. They need our help tweaking the job skills and helping job cards. So a lot of times our students do have that impediment. The third criteria is that the customer must need us and our services to prepare for work. So if you can just get rid of your impairment on your own, you don't really need us that much. But if you need us to help step in and eliminate that, then we can help you. The fourth and final criteria is that we believe, that's to say the counselor believes that they can achieve an employment outcome. So that's the biggest thing with VR services. We have to think that you can get a successful integrated employment outcome. So if we don't think we're looking at employment at the end, you're not going to be able to go through full VR services. Just as if you said, hey, I want pre-ETS services, but I don't want my student to work in the future, that would be someone who stays with pre-ETS and doesn't go through VR and won't be eligible.
I've heard before that there is like what of a requirement, like the student has to want to work. So it's got to be beyond the mom wants the student to work.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about that?
Absolutely, I can. We get that a lot, believe it or not. Mom believes in the student, as you should, or the parents believe in the student and they want them to work, but the student will get in there and say, I don't want a job. And that's pretty much that. I mean, of course, we can say, well, maybe you don't mean that. We're not just going to dismiss the child just for saying they don't want a job because maybe they didn't want it that day. They were having a bad day. But if it's a continuous thing or the student demonstrates no motivation to actually work, then there's no reason for them to continue with VR, because that is what a successful closure in VR looks like, full scale employment. So again, if you don't want that, that's okay. There are services that are out there for you, pre-ETS included, and you can still access those to see how the student feels. Maybe they'll change their mind while they're getting those pre-ETS services. They may like them. But if you decide to go full VR and say, we like these, but we want more, just know that if the student does not wish to work, they won't get past that eligibility criteria.
Can you also tell us some examples, since we're the ADHD support group? We've got people with ADHD, maybe some people with comorbid conditions, autism spectrum. Can you give us some examples of what some substantial impediment to employment might be for that, for those diagnoses?
Absolutely, I can. So especially, I'm glad you brought up our students on the spectrum. And also note what we've seen is that autism and ADHD are kind of under the same umbrella as far as neurodevelopmental disorders, and they mimic each other a little bit. So we get to see the disorders overlap a little bit sometimes, and we see the same behavior. So this kind of goes for both, but especially with our students on the spectrum, the social skills are key. And so what we see is that we get a lot of students who are brilliant, but they have no social skills. They will get on that interview and they will never call them, or they'll get the job and get fired in 2 days because everyone is just, they think they're a jerk, but it's not that they're a jerk. Their behaviors are a little different. And so that is what an impediment to employment would look like for that kind of student. Sometimes it is the social skills. They have the cognitive ability to do the job. They just don't have the social wherewithal. And so they need training. So they would qualify for services if they do in fact want to work.
And some things that we've seen with ADHD is explosive anger, 0 to 100. So kind of that anger management, because sometimes people are going to make you mad and work. And then also, of course, the impulsive communication of maybe they, don't think before they speak, and they say something that causes them to get fired, and those types of things. So thank you for sharing that.
All right, so this slide I won't take too much of your time with because Anna already explained pretty much what we do with our pre-ETS services, but I do want to just re-emphasize that again, the pre-ETS services are part of VR, but the full-scale VR is the next step. So this is the first step. Let's say you just want to see what VR looks like and start with the pre-ETS services. What you'll get are services that fall in these categories that you see listed here. And so again, career exploration, work-based readiness, self-advocacy, job readiness, and I'm sorry, I'm having a break for today. But you see on the screen the 5 services that we have. And as Anna already described, these are geared towards training. So this is a big deal with our students because we're finding that students have the hard skills to keep their jobs, but they do not have the soft skills. So a lot of the emphasis here is soft skills. Again, with that work-based learning, they get to be in a safe environment and work and get paid, but still get to have that counselor, have those support, meet up and kind of talk with them about what this is looking like. So it's really, really important. I emphasize this to always take advantage of this. Also worth mentioning, let's say you don't apply for pre-ETS services at first. And you say, I'm just gonna go full VR, I want the whole thing, everything you got. That's fine because you can still access these services in full VR. So these services can come before full VR and after full VR. You get access to them as long as you're a student with a disability aged 14 to 22.
And also, I just want to kind of add on because that question before about if somebody already has a job, can they access these services? And this is probably good if you need those vocational adjustment training classes or some of those soft skills that could improve, how they're getting to work or how they're communicating at work too. So I just wanted to answer that because Miss Rainery, I guess, yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up again because I made a mental note to answer it and forgot to actually answer it. So yes, a part of what VR does is helping maintain employment that you already have. So that's especially with our adults, we do that service a lot more, but with students as well. So let's say you're at Burger King and you're yelling at everybody every day and you can't keep going like that. You can get a VR counselor and we can provide those supports on site. Also note that we do have what they call ASD supports, which is different from a job coach, which we also have. So we can help you with a job coach on your job to help you keep your job. Or let's say you're just having those outbursts, you know how to do your job, but you can't get that social aspect down. We do actually have ASD supports to go on the job and kind of just support you through those changes and through those behavioral patterns to help minimize that and its effect on your employment performance.
Kristen, can you talk about, so when somebody kind of enters into VR, they kind of do this intake or whatever, there's the word on the street in the disability community is that VR has money to help to help, okay? But all services are tailored to that individual. So what Johnny might get, Anna might not get, okay? But can you talk about those assessments and the kind of the types of assessments that you guys do? Because they're really deep and wide and they really give a lot of information, and then where you go after you get those results.
Sure. So, and this can go so many different ways. So I'll try to streamline it as much as possible. So the first thing you see when you're applying as a student is more than likely that 1820 that Anna showed. So that's the first thing we're going off of. And then we get the ARD paperwork, or we get 504 paperwork, or something similar to just say this is a person who has a disability who attends school. So that's the first bit of we get, and then based off that we kind of decide where we want to go. So if you want to go further into VR, or even if you kind of hang around at pre-ETS, we have certain assessments, and I already described one, the Berkman, which I recommend to everyone. It is an outstanding assessment. It not only gauges your interest, but it gauges what your best work environment is. Do you work better with a team or alone? Well, do you have attitude issues at work? You need to work on that. What kind of boss you need? It really goes into very, very strenuous detail to tell you pretty much everything. And so I really, really recommend that. You can get that in pre-TS or full VR services. But let's say you decide to keep going into VR. We have other assessments that we can also give the student. One of my favorites is the vocational assessment. This is even better for students that don't have the capacity to take an online computerized assessment like the Berkman. Everyone doesn't have the reading level for that. So if you have students who have a little bit less capacity, we can send them for a vocational evaluation where it can go from 1 day to 5 days, and it pretty much tests everything as far as employability. So we find out if the student can use both hands, or if they can even work with their hands. Can they put things together? Can they remember things from can they have a photographic memory? Can they repeat instructions? Can they read? Can they do this? Can they count? It looks at everything. And by the time you're done, we get a report that says, these are all the things that they're good at, that they should look at being, where they should look at being employed with. So we get a full list of that. We also have a neuropsychological and psychological evaluation where we send you to a psychiatrist and they evaluate you. That's for our people where we may suspect there's some maybe autism or possibly even ADHD, things like that. Like if you're not sure, but you're seeing the symptoms, you can talk with your counselor about that, and they could possibly send them for an evaluation, or even just to make sure that what you have is right. So if they diagnose you with something and it doesn't quite match up, you don't think that's necessarily what's going on. Sometimes you and the school may disagree. That's okay. We can send the student for evaluations of the neuropsychological or psychological as well.
I want to chime in on that because those neuropsych evals are very, very important. If you have a student that's transitioning into other programs, post high school, and your child might need accommodations on that level, usually those evaluations need to be, in the last 3 years. Sometimes they'll go to 5 years. And those evaluations are typically not covered by traditional health insurance, and they're also usually very expensive, anywhere from $2,500 to $5,000. So I think that is something that's valuable information if we're kind of entering into this transition phase with our kids. That if you haven't ever had that type of assessment, and again, it's based off of whether your child even needs that assessment, but it may be an important assessment that you need on your radar for just having the best accommodations in place for them as they move forward in life, for sure.
Yes, thank you for saying that. So that's what I always, when I was a counselor, that's what I always used to tell my customers. We definitely aren't in the business of going fishing, as they call it. Just, oh, I want services, so let me find something to be going on. But if we need to have a clearer picture, then absolutely. So for example, I had a student who was on his IEP. He had intellectual disability. That's what it said, which it was true. That was accurate. But I started noticing some self-stimulation, repetitiveness, and some other characteristics that we see a lot with autism. And so I asked mom and I asked the school, hey, do you know if this has ever been looked at, that he may have a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder? And they said, we think he might, however, it doesn't necessarily affect his education. Like what he has in place works well for school. And so when that happens, sometimes it's not that the school doesn't care or anything like that. It's just that it's not needed for what he's doing at school. So in those kind of cases that we're happy to do an evaluation. So that's what I did. I went and got him an evaluation. He came back, he did have autism spectrum disorder, and we were able to do better with placing him outside of school. So what we do doesn't necessarily, we can't take it to the school and be like, you see this, you have to do this. But if we're looking at jobs, then we'll have a better picture of, oh, he has intellectual disability as well as autism spectrum disorder. And that will tell our job coach more so they know what kind of supports they need to be putting in place for the student.
So if parents want to engage the Texas workforce, the TWC for I'm tripping it up just like everybody else. They can contact you guys directly, or you guys have counselors at the public schools? Do you have them at private schools? How does that work? And what if they're homeschooled?
Okay, so I'll take it piece by piece, and that'll actually tie into this slide. So that's perfect. You read my mind. So of course, you can always contact Anna or myself. Again, both of our student hireability navigators are here to assist us with getting these referrals. We want them. We want to give services to your students. We want to spend money that in a meaningful way. So you can always contact them. You can contact myself. I do have the master list of who is working with what school, but your schools will also hopefully know who their assigned counselor is. Most comprehensive high schools do have an assigned counselor. And if they're homeschooled, they will go to a counselor that is at the office that probably works with mostly adults, but they will also take on that referral. So we can serve homeschooled students with transition services. They will get all the services that everyone else is getting just from other counselors. And speaking of that, I want to bring attention to the slide, because what you'll see in your schools is that you may have something called a TVRC, which is a transition vocational rehab counselor, or you'll have a VOC rehab counselor, which is an adult general caseload counselor. So the important thing to know is that the TVRCs will be more available at the schools for more meetings and things like that, and have more flexibility because we're mobile. Even before COVID, we go into the schools every day. But the VRCs will give you the exact same services, but they may be meeting with you over Zoom or over Teams or just a phone call. But the important thing to remember is that you will get the same services. The transition program covers everyone. So no matter who you get, you should be receiving those transition or pre-TS services. And if you aren't getting them from the counselor, please call me. No one will get in trouble. We just need to know so we can make sure that you're getting what you need.
I'm really glad that you said that, because sometimes we hear from families that they've reached out and they didn't hear back, and they've emailed, they've called, and they got nothing. And so they just kind of gave up. So basically, if you've been hitting a brick wall at the school for these services, then they can reach out directly to you. And so there is a workaround for that, for sure.
Yes, please,
Perfect.
please don't give up. Call me. Sometimes, and I'll be honest, it's a state agency. So many times there's some turnaround and people may move on to other jobs, and we're so caught up in the day-to-day that the school may not realize that that's not the counselor anymore. Or we may have a new counselor who doesn't realize that they have a school assignment, because sometimes it just slips through the cracks. So it could be for so many different things, or it could even be that they didn't realize they had to actually engage with the school to get referrals. So there's so many different things that could be going on, but we can't clarify it or figure it out unless you guys let us know what's going on.
So furthermore, if a person has engaged the services before and they were kind of turned away, or it went into a black hole, they never heard from anybody else, they can re-engage. They can circle back and kind of get assigned to somebody new. Is that correct?
They can always request to have a new counselor. Let's say the case was closed, and they can just probably start over with a brand new counselor anyway. But if they're still on that caseload, of course, we want to try to repair the relationship if possible. That's always the first step. But if it just will not work, or you moved and you want to be closer to another office or something like that, you can always request to be transferred to another caseload.
So let's say I have a 14-year-old and we kind of go through these services, and you said they're not forever. Okay, so let's say that that the services were engaged for 18 months or something, or whatever. He's 16, he gets a job, things are going well, they've done all the assessments, he's done all the training, everything's good, case is closed. Then he loses his job. Can he re-engage? Can they come back to you if the case was closed after employment was initially found and assessments were done?
Good question. The short answer is you absolutely can come back. Where it gets tricky is what we provide, because if we provided you, for example, work readiness services and got you ready for employment, then if we did our jobs correctly, not saying that we always do, but if we did, then you shouldn't need that service again. You should know how to go back and do it. But there could be other services that we assist with on this time around. It could just be general job search. It could be, instead of a job coach, we provide you with psychological counseling to get over anxiety with losing your job, that kind of thing. So we can provide additional supports, but we would have to have a really good justification for providing the exact same service. That's a little bit trickier. So just keep that in mind.
Got it.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite slides, Work Innovation Opportunity Act. This is pretty much explaining why we're here and why pre-TS services were created. We found out many of our students were graduating to the couch and not doing anything. And the federal government didn't like that very much. So they basically said, you guys are responsible for training them up sooner. So they moved it down to 14 and doing more with them. Because before we were just doing general VR, which is just looking for a job like we do with adults. The kids aren't ready for that. They need the training on the front end. So that's why we have WIOA. A little more information about WIOA. So this is where they really give you all of our business. And this is why you see us saying we have the money. We are required to spend 15% of that federal allocation on pre-TS money. Now they aren't suggesting, they're saying you must do this to prove that you are investing enough into these students. So when we're talking about these services, we really do have to give them to the students. We have to make sure they're getting all they need. So we kind of deplete that number of people who are graduating and have a disability and aren't doing anything. That's the workforce, especially here in Texas. They love working adults who pay taxes. So we're doing all we can to provide all of those services to our students.
Now, with families that have individuals with disabilities, we're very familiar with the waivers list in Texas and the waiting list and how long they are. Is there a waiting list for VR, or are you guys you're taking and engaging right away, or is it a long wait?
In a perfect world, you should be engaged right away. Again, if that's not happening, let me know. Now, of course, we want to be reasonable because our counselors are really, really working hard right now with everything being virtual, which I forgot to mention that before. All of our services are currently virtual if needed. So just keep that in mind. But our counselors are really working hard. So sometimes there may be a few days in between hearing from them. So if you don't hear from them immediately, don't freak out. It may take a second because there are lots of people coming in. Most of our counselors see at least 4, 5, 6 people a week. Some people see that in a day, depending on what area you're in. So, if we're talking Fort Bend, I know we've got people from everywhere, but if we're talking Fort Bend, that's a pretty busy area as well. So there's not a wait list, and it shouldn't take more than 14 days. If you don't hear in 2 weeks from someone, please let us know, and we'll reach out to make sure that you're engaging. And potentially eligible, another one of my favorite slides. So all of those wonderful services that Anna talked about earlier, this is where you receive them. So if you don't want to go into full VR services, we have potentially eligible by grace of WIOA. And it basically means you aren't getting VR services yet fully, but you could be. So we're looking at you as a prospective customer, and we want to just give you everything we got to entice you to come in and get those full VR services. So we start you off with those core 5. And so the only thing you have to be, as we said before, is potentially eligible for services. So that speaks to when I was saying earlier about how there's a eligibility criteria for VR. There's not one for potential because it's saying that you just could be a customer. We're not gauging to see if you are one yet. So in order to do that, like Anna said before, you just need to be a student with a disability, and you need to be getting services from the school. And so again, it's not meant to just get rid of VR and say you can't do it, but it's meant to kind of show you what you could get with VR. So you get kind of a little appetizer, so to speak, with these training services. And again, these are only for students with disabilities. Adults do not get these services. So that should be incentive to go ahead and get your student link while they are still a student, because once they graduate, they cannot access those pre-ETS services any longer. And we kind of already talked about this. Allison read my mind, how to get started. Again, you can always contact us, but you can always, if talk with your school, if they have a good relationship with the counselor, they can say, oh yes, Kristen is our counselor and that's who you're going to talk to, and they can arrange a meeting that way. It's a little bit easier right now with Zoom. We also can have you call into the office. You can email us. Usually it goes to our Austin state office and then they bring it and they send it back down. So I would probably recommend starting with the school or Anna or myself, just seeing if there is someone assigned. If there's not anyone assigned, then you can call directly to one of the field offices and we'll get you that number and they'll link you with a counselor who works within the office.
Can you talk about what you say and what you don't say when you call? Because we've heard this, like where people say, I heard you guys do neuropsych testing for free. I need that for my kid. So they call and say that, whereas, I mean, there's a whole big service. So talk about how they engage your services when they call.
Yeah, thank you, good question. So we do get that a lot. And it's not to say that we don't do the things that you call and ask for, but it's all for a greater purpose. So if you just want, because I've had this where people come and say, well, I just need you to pay for school. And well, that doesn't really serve the disability per se. It's something that we do that for students. We do pay for tuition sometimes, but it has to be serving kind of a greater purpose, getting them ready for employment. So you have to, everything that you are asking for or wanting, you have to have that framed within employment. So when you call and say, hey, I just want a test, or Social Security just said, I have to talk to you because we want Social Security, the counselor may not engage because they're there to help get employment. So if you're not looking for that, then it's a little more difficult. Now with the pre-ETS side of it, if you call and say, I want pre-ETS services, that's permissible, that's fine, because that's literally what we're trying to push. So you can call and ask for that, or you can call and say, we need help training for a job, or we need this to help prepare for work later. Any of that is fine, but just don't say we want this one thing that really doesn't have anything to do with work. It could possibly be provided, but we don't want to start with that. And you can always ask and say, I heard you do this as well. Is that possible? And the counselor will talk to you about that.
Is there a such thing as, like, some kids, they don't have their driver's license yet, they need it, but they do have a disability. So like disability driving rehab, there are programs to teach kids to drive so that way they can get to employment,
Yes.
safely. Is that something that is a service, if warranted, that would be covered under VR?
Yes, we do. We actually do just general driver's education. We can assist with that sometimes. And we also can assist with the vehicle modification type driver training. If they modify your vehicle and you need to learn how to drive, we can do that as well. We also assist with actual vehicle modifications for students that have physical issues. We do that as well. So all three of those we can help with if needed.
Wow, that's huge, and those are big, big, big expenses to families that are often
Yes.
cost prohibitive for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And the whole point of that is just so we can, again, get them to work, get them ready to go to work, that kind of thing. So we do assist with that. Keep in mind that it's full VR, and certain things, vehicle modifications, school tuition, and the counselor will brief you on this, but some of those do require financial participation. Pre-ETS services, employment services are all free. But there are some services where we do have to pull your finances to see what you need to contribute, if anything. Sometimes you don't need to contribute anything, but we do have to have evidence that you have financial need for some of those bigger services.
For sure.
And here is these are all my counterparts, all the people I work with, all of the regional transition program specialists. So like I said, I have 5 counterparts and they're spread out throughout Texas. So if you have people in other parts of the state that need assistance, you can always reach out to them as well, or reach out to me and I can get you linked with them.
Perfect.
And those are the big bosses there. That's the state team. So if, God forbid, we don't get you what you need and you can't get anyone else, this would be your next step, but hopefully that never happens.
Kristen, I have a question.
Mhm.
There's multiple questions from the
Okay.
Q&A. This last one, I'll go through all of them, but Is the driver education a pre-ETS or a VR service?
That is a full VR service.
Okay. And just so everybody can see what other people are asking, are there several providers for the vocational assessment? Does the client get to choose the provider?
Yes, so what you'll see is that with our different services, we have, it's a free market here. So we have a lot of providers that do the same thing. And that's done because one, we want you to pick your choice. And two, everyone doesn't live in the same area. So wherever you are, there's a set of people who provide those services. So if we're in Fort Bend, we have a whole list of people who provide any of those services, including vocational assessment within the Fort Bend area, or you can go out of that area if you so choose.
And then we had one, because I know we sent one flyer out for SEAL. It included 14 to 22. It's really for SEAL specific, it's 16 to 22. And that is that's an employer thing. That is because that's the age that they want for legal reasons. But all of the other pre-ets, that's 14 to 22. And somebody's asking if they're not 16, are there anything for them to do this summer? Kristen, did you want to speak on camps?
Sure. We do a lot, and that's kind of the bread and butter with those pre-TS services, because a lot of it is training focused. So the career exploration, that's perfect for our 14 and 15-year-olds. The work readiness training. So you can't get a job yet, but you can start learning about what it looks like to work, how to talk to your boss, how to dress, how to address your customers if they come in, how not to talk to people when they come to work. So all of those things are great. Also information on post-secondary opportunities. So it's not time to go to college, but we can start looking at what type of college you would need to go to, what supports are there. So there's lots of things that we can do to get them ready for that next step, which is when they're 16, getting that job.
And I think that earlier the better. So I mean, if you have a 14-year-old, getting that started, some of our kids, I mean, clearly we've got geniuses, but some of them, they're delayed, emotionally, maturity wise. And so having that ramp up time. So if you're 14 and you're ramping up and, building skills and getting that training, so that way when they are 16, that they can launch to, into a job. I think that's exciting. But what happens is these high school years fly by. At first you're eighth grade or freshman and you think, oh, I got 4 years. And then before you know it, you blink and you're like, oh my gosh, it already passed. So I definitely agree that the sooner to get started, the better.
I agree, absolutely. Especially if of course, we want everyone to apply for services, but if you think that your student could work, but they just need a lot of training and a lot of work, then I definitely recommend 14, because if we start at 16, we'll get some good things accomplished, but maybe not as much as we could have if we started earlier.
Somebody is asking for the camps. I know that I think there's one flyer out for the HCC VAST camp. There's a couple that we'll share with Allison. And then really just keep your eye open, because I think right now we're about to see a lot more of what's coming up. I know of a couple, but I'm sure there's going to be more.
And I actually think, I don't know, I hate to say this, but I actually think that we have a webinar on camps coming up in the next month or something. I think that I've definitely seen that there's some camp webinars out there for students with disabilities. And I mean, there's a ton of different camps out there. So you guys have camps. The flyer that you send will attach to the email that we're sending out to the families with the video. And then you're going to send me that PDF with the page with all the links on it. So we'll send all of those out.
And we have is it too late to sign up for an 18-year-old that is about to graduate in May? Do they have to be in an educational program?
So it's never too late to sign them up. If you want pre-ETS services, you may be looking at a window that's closing. Now, if they're getting ready to go to college, then that opens up. So when you say educational setting, we mean high school or college. So if you got college students who need these services, they can access pre-ETS services as long as they're under 22 years of age. So if they're going to graduate and go to, HCC, for example, in the fall, there's still time to get those pre-test services. If they're graduating and they're not going to go to school, then we're looking at VR services, which are still great. It's just not those pre-ETS. So there's still some training there, just not as much. But I still encourage you to get them to apply because they have full supports as an adult with vocational rehabilitation.
Kristen, everyone's asking for your information.
I am typing it in the chat. These days, I apologize. Sometimes it takes a couple of times of me missing some phone calls or some emails. I apologize. It's a very busy time, but do not give up on me. Please keep trying to contact me if you don't get me at first. But email is probably the easiest way right now. I'm usually always in a meeting. And so I barely have time to get to the phone, but I can get to the email and answer you a little bit quicker. Oh, I sent it to you on accident, Anna. Let me type it for the whole thing. My apologies. But yes, please contact me if you have any questions, or even if it's just who's my counselor, I can point you in the right direction.
And then we have.
And now's a great time.
Can you speak to the Bridge to Success Summer Camp by Engage Employment Solutions at Camp El Tesoro? I have not heard of that.
Let me see. You know, I don't know. I've heard of Bridge to Success. I have heard of that. What I don't know is if it is covered as services in VR, because there are a lot of camps out there that pay for, but we may be able to. So if you send me an email, I can check into that to see and advise you further.
And it says, how soon can you sign up for the summer paid work experience?
Now we're taking people now. We've gotten, and move fast, we've gotten 200 referrals so far, and our goal is about 525. So you're filling up very quickly. You will need a VR counselor for that. So make sure you get linked with a counselor as soon as you possibly can.
And I do want to say, somebody asked if they need to go through Workforce Solutions to get everything we're talking about today. Everything today is through Vocational Rehabilitation, Texas Workforce Solutions. So if you already have a counselor there, that's who you'll go through, because that's who you would go through anyway. We would get you back there. So ask them about any of these services. If it's something like camps, they may not have heard of them yet, then they can ask Kristen about those as well. That's all the questions that I have here.
Perfect. Well, it's a lot to take in. You guys have shared a lot of information in a short period of time and answered a lot of questions. And I definitely appreciate you guys being here. It's something that we need help with, and our kids need help with this, and they want to work. They want to do things. They want to be successful, but sometimes some of their underlying diagnoses cause issues for them, whether it's anxiety or anger or whatever it might be, social awkwardness. There's so many different things, but it's so encouraging to know that there's truly help out there. It doesn't have to cost tens of thousands of dollars to you. It is available. You guys have state and federal funding and money that needs to be spent for these services. So that is really all encouraging. And there's a lot of discouraging things in the world of disabilities in Texas with our long waiver lists and things like that. So this is all very, very encouraging. I would just like to thank you both for being here tonight and sharing your time and all of your information. I'd like to thank the families for being here tonight. If you're new to the ADDA support group at Fort Bend, we're glad you're here. Again, you guys will get the email. There will be a link for how you can join the ADDA support group. It's never a requirement to attend these meetings. We don't make people join, but membership is pretty cheap at like $40 a year. They also have annual conferences. There's all kinds of other meetings and other material and things that you'll have access to that'll be very valuable. And the mothership of ADDA can certainly use our support. So consider that for sure. If we don't have any additional questions, I'm going to close the meeting. I just want to peek really quick to see if we do. Okay, I think that's all we've got. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Anna. Thanks for being here. Thanks, everyone. And this meeting, again, we'll come back together. We are going to meet through the summer. We normally don't. So the last Tuesday of every month. And if you signed up for this one, you'll get an email letting you know on our future meetings and who our speakers will be. So thanks so much, everyone. And I hope you have a great night.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
This is great.